Hi, everybody. I'm Sue Enquist, the former head softball coach at UCLA. And with me today, Dr. Suzy McNulty. Hi, Suzy. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Coach Sue. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Before we get started, I just first want to say thank you to the NFCA, their staff, and all the people behind this online event, because there's a lot of work that went into it. To the coaches out there, to your staff, and to your players, I want you to know that we realize how hard this has been. 2020. And we're just wishing you great health and safety, and may 2021 be your best year yet. So on that note, I want to share with you a little bit about Dr. Suzy McNulty. First of all, she's a pediatrician. She's a doctor. She's going to be our subject matter expert today. I'll be the practitioner. And she's also a mom of 2 prospective daughters that are playing softball. They're on the front line. And she's also a former coach and a player. So she wears many hats and has a wealth of information for all of us. So on that note, let's go ahead and get to the deck. Our goal really today is to have a stopping moment for you to really think about the things that you may want to improve on yourself and your team. We're going to be covering the research around mental health, and we're focusing on resiliency today. We're going to focus and give you a kind of a coach's toolbox of activities. A survey. We're going to be doing a national survey next year, and we would love for you to sign up today and be a part of that. And then we'll just have our closing thoughts. For you, we're hoping that this insight provides a launching opportunity to create change in your practices so we can create more joy, fun, greater development, and hopefully get some more W's as well. But our real goal today is to get us focusing on the student athletes' wellness and their own resiliency. We're going to ask you to assess yourself in what you're doing and how you impact the student athletes, give you those resources that you need, and hopefully all of us do a little bit of improvement. So we have our contact card here if you need to get a hold of the doctor or myself. And on that note, Dr. McNulty, the deck is yours.
Thank Coach Sue, and I echo your thoughts in thanking the NFCA for letting us have this platform to reach out to the coaches nationally. I see you on the fields every day and how hard you guys are working, how much you care for our kids as you try and teach them not only about softball, but about life. So I appreciate everything you guys do. And my job is to try to get you information that may actually make your jobs easier. So with that, let's talk about what's been going on in the past 6 to 9 months. As we all know, there's a pandemic going on. COVID-19 started back in the early part of the year, and it pretty much has turned our lives upside down, right? Our kids are now have had to distance learn. They were completely in social isolation for quite a long time, and some are still so. There really has been a huge change in all of our routines, whether or not it was for school, whether it was sports, whether it was for fun, going on vacation, family stuff. Nothing is the same anymore. Parents or ourselves may have actually had significant changes in job status, and of which that's directly affected our children, as well as many of our players also probably have food, shelter, financial insecurities, and maybe struggling to even, get food on the table, let alone play softball. In addition to challenges in general during COVID, so now on top of this, we have to also focus on what are the challenges that we have to deal with within the sports environment. So your change in practicing game format is completely different than what you've been used to. You've had to totally revamp everything you've done. You've had to build in social distancing into your workouts, with the 3 W's, the washing hands, wearing a mask, and watching your distance. League tournament play is pretty much nothing like it was before. And depending on where you are in the country, it may be, completely non-existent or completely back to what you would consider as pre-pandemic activity level. And often the kids will echo that this isn't fair. Why are they getting to do something and we aren't? And I don't have to point out to you guys that recruiting has completely changed. The landscape is completely different than what it was. And your jobs, the collegiate coaches' jobs have completely become so much more difficult. So what we want to do is we want to be able to talk about what can we do to help these kids during this time. But before we actually do that, let's actually go back before COVID. So prior to COVID, we were actually involved in quite a bit of data gathering, and some of the researchers from around the world actually have been sounding alarms now for a few years. And some of the trends they're seeing is quite alarming. So Keyes actually in 2019 reported on just a general increase over the past 10 years in this demographic of increasing loneliness, difficulty with sleep, depressive and anxiety symptoms, and just general social interaction has been decreased per surveys that they've conducted with this age group. Another statistic that has recently been published by the Center for Disease Control last year was that the increase of suicide for 10 to 14-year-olds had actually tripled. That's an astounding number, 200% increase over 10 years. In addition, specifically for our demographics, over the 15 to 19-year-old girls, their suicide rate actually doubled. So increased by 100% over those 10 years as well. In fact, these numbers have risen so much so that suicide is now the number 2 cause of death in the 10 to 24-year-old age range. It's increased over 50% from this 2007 to 2017. Even more alarming, though, is a new statistic that has been coming out, and it's been reported for years, but it hasn't really been in the mainstream, and that's perfectionism. 2 in 5, or 40% of kids now between the ages of 10 and 24 actually report and say that they actually are perfectionists. Specifically, socially prescribed perfectionism, which is driven by social media, it seems to be the driving factor behind this perfectionistic tendencies. Social media creates a false sense of perfectionism, and it's almost like the theory of the better I do, the better I'm expected to do. So what is perfectionism? So Curran and Hill, which are 2 researchers in England, basically defined it last year as excessive pressure to perform. It's a very rigid way of thinking that really makes these kids say, well, I either have to do all or nothing. And it's a very, very strong belief that, being perfect absolutely is necessary, and they think it's actually possible, and they have to do it in order to be successful. So what happens with perfectionism, it actually creates this vicious cycle. And so what happens with this cycle is it really leads to negative self-evaluation and also conditional self-esteem. And then what happens is, because of that, too many nothing things result, right? Because you can't always succeed at every single thing that you set your mind to, which then in turn leads to depression and anxiety in their minds. And when you leave this cycle unchanged, what happens is they develop this fear of performing below their quote unquote, perfect, their perfect expectations. And they end up really struggling to find success. It leads to self-sabotage of performance. It leads to them suffering through profound anxiety. And many times it ends up with them dropping out of class, out of their major, out of school, out of their sport, and unfortunately out of life. So I think one of the most alarming things that I've learned about perfectionism is 2 things. One, people who identify as being perfectionists are actually unable to communicate their distress with others. So that whole cycle I just talked about, they can't let anyone know about it, because to them, that's a sign of unacceptable weakness if they let us know that they're struggling. Even more concerning is these are actually the kids that we thought, oh, these guys are fine. They've got a 4.5 GPA. These are the kids that are your leaders of your team. They're the top, kids that are getting that are verbaling on September 1st of their junior year. They're in the Hot 100. That you think, oh my gosh, they've got everything going for them. And so we more easily dismiss them because they don't have behavioral problems. They're not the kids dropping out of school. They're the ones that are finding academic success. They're high achieving. They have goals. Why would we worry about them? And the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, or the AFSP, in 2019 also realized the danger that we were starting to see with perfectionism, and actually came out and said that this is now a risk factor for suicide. It's linked to anxiety and depression, and we are seeing a larger amount of kids who identified as perfectionistic becoming the face of suicide. So even before the pandemic, we were already starting to reach out to our patients, to our athletes, to our players, to our kids, to our family and friends, to get the word out that we've got to help these kids. Throw in a pandemic and we have a recipe for disaster. We realize how hard you guys are having to work to keep your kids focused on what needs to get done. But at the same time, you're finding yourself that you are now the team psychologist as well. So how can we incorporate those two? So when I talk to my patients in my office, I see my athletes all the time, and they come in and they tell me all these things that they're worried about. And we talk about how can you be resilient? And resiliency is basically the process of adapting well in the faces of adversity, trauma, tragedy, significant source of stress. In other words, what we're all living through right now, this is considered a significant source of stress. And so what we need to teach them, and what I teach my patients and my athletes every day in my office, and what I used to always teach my players when I was on the field, was I need to give you the ability to bounce back from difficult experiences, from that loss, from this trauma, from a tragedy, right? This is what we need to teach them now, here, today. And so we really need to help players. How can we incorporate tools to build their mental strength and resiliency? So I have 5 tools that I teach, and I've been teaching my patients and my students, my athletes, my own kids, on how can I be resilient in this time. And the number one thing I talk to them about is how to control the controllables. So I point out things that they can't control. They cannot control the weather, the field conditions, the umpire strike zone. As much as you think the umpire strike zone sucks, you still have to go out there and hit the ball, right? The COVID pandemic, I cannot control that there's a pandemic going on, but at the same time, we still have to function. So instead, we need to control things we can control, which are things like attitude, their effort. They can control how much sleep they're getting, what time they're going to bed, what time they're waking up, what they're eating, how much they're working out, where they're working out, what they're doing, how they're focusing, how coachable they are. Those are all things they can control. So what we need to do is actually teach them how to reset expectations. We need to teach them to train for excellence instead of perfection. So another way to say this is that we need to help them train for personal best. And it's personal best for that moment in time, actually. So it might be that it's the 100% of your 50% that you have, but you're still giving effort. And it's much more important than the actual outcome itself. They're stuck in their ways. And so we need to help them focus on the controllables. So the next step then is to actually help them train for excellence instead. So this is actually just a shift in thinking. This allows them to try and strive for actual ideal standards, which would be, win the game, win the league, win the at bat. But they also have to recognize environment, human error, teammates might impact performances on any given day, which is the uncontrollables. So this is my favorite quote. Put this in the dugout, on your Twitter feed, your Facebook page, the back of your clipboard, hand it out to every kid on your team, and tell this to them every day. The only person that you should try to be better than is the person you were yesterday. In other words, they need to compete against themselves. Now, how can you start to do this? So they need to understand the difference between process goals and outcome goals. Traditionally, we've always looked at outcome goals, right? We look at what's the batting average, where are you in the lineup, did we win this season? Those are the very measurable and very rigid. We need to get away from that, and we instead need to look at process goals. Process goals are more effort-based, and they're how we get to our outcomes. And so an example of that would be quality at bats. Whether or not you actually get on base, but you had a quality at bat, it really tells us a whole lot more, and you achieved the process even though you might not have achieved the outcome you wanted. And the fifth thing, and I think is a really important thing to remember about now, is we really need to teach them how to innovate and come up with a new way of thinking about competitiveness or competition. And so the way they do that is to focus on their performance goals rather than focusing on outcome goals. And performance goals are really just process goals, right? So you identify specific standards that can't be affected by outside factors. And so really what it comes down to is they're just competing against themselves. Compete against you is what you need to tell them and remind them of every day. They don't have to worry about if someone else has signed on their team and they haven't. They don't have to worry about if they're on the Hot 100 list. They don't have to worry about if they're all league or if they got on All-Stars, if they're on gold or silver All-Stars. It really comes down to, are they getting better than they were yesterday? Now, one last thing that really needs to be emphasized, especially at a time when we are all going through a significant world event that really has affected our everyday lives, is that people really start to become devalued. They start to feel devalued at a time when we're dealing with significant stress. We also know, and Flett, who's a researcher up in Canada, is done lots of work on mattering. And he's really found that the people who think that they matter then are able to thrive. So you need to reach out to your players. Athletes thrive when they feel like they matter. People thrive when they feel like they matter. And remind them, even though we might have to physically distance with our 3 Ws, we don't have to socially disconnect. We can still be a community even though we might have to wear a mask, socially distance, wash our hands frequently. We can still be there and make sure that we all know that we do matter. So just quickly, these guidelines that I just went through are actually going to be published soon as a part of the NATA, AAP, and the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine co-joined efforts to publish guidelines on youth sports after COVID. And then this will be an additional part that will be the mental health and resiliency section. Will also be there for your help. These links will be live on our chat as well as in our slide deck. Lastly, with the AMSSM, the AAP, and the NATA that's joined together to publish these guidelines, prior to COVID, the Committee on Sports Medicine and Fitness from the AAP and the youth sports advocacy team from the AMSSM had joined together, and we actually met in Washington last year to meet with some strategists on how we can actually get information out to the general public on how to really better youth sports and access to youth sports and education. In addition, we have also partnered with One Softball, and a few years ago we formed the Health and Wellness Consortium that also has kind of the same idea in mind. So this all kind of ties together. In fact, we were in the process of doing a survey last year when we encountered COVID. This was actually brought up last year in the NFCA convention. We were starting to collect signatures and the survey had to be put on hold because of COVID. We are now going to be reopening that survey again, but now for 2021. The link will be in our slide deck as well as live on this chat as well. You can actually click on the link and sign up for interest. And then surveys will go out live to players come next August of 2021. So, and this is basically just the information that I gave you. Again, the link is at the bottom. You can click on that and just sign up to get information sent as we start to head towards the live survey window.
You know, Dr. McNulty, there was a wealth of information there. I want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing. I want to put you on the hot seat if I can real quick. Those coaches have to wear a lot of hats, just like you do. A lot of coaches out there that are parents and big brothers and big sisters and trying to manage on a personal and professional level. Give us something that you hang on to every day. You're dealing with life and death during the day as a doctor and also a mom and somebody that's in the whole recruiting world. Tell me something that you hang on to that maybe all of us can put in our back pocket going into 2021.
I found myself in the past 6 months really repeating over and over again, not only to myself, but to my girls, to my patients, to the parents that come in going, what am I supposed to do? And it really comes back to control the controllables. In other words, there's so many things out there going on right now that I wish I could change. And it makes me so upset and angry that there's things going on in our world that really shouldn't be. But I can't change that necessarily. But I can change certain things around me. And I can focus on the things that I'm working on right now. And I think that really does help us get through difficult times. And it really is teaching resiliency. There's plenty of things that have come out of that will come out of COVID or already has come out of COVID that I think will be good learning experiences for all of us. Has it been some tough learning experiences? Yes. But I think our kids will come out more resilient as long as we give them the tools in order to figure it out.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I just want to wish you luck. And I'm going to finish up here, give us some practitioner information and hopefully some sticky content for you. So I'll see you in a minute, Suzy. This was a powerful quote that we had gotten from our feedback with One Softball. If we can always remember that mental health is not a stigma. Let's not stigmatize it, or you're not weak sauce. But mental health is something that we deal with just as we deal with injuries. Strategy 1, all these strategies align with Dr. McNulty's presentation. She talked a lot about control the controllables, a great worksheet. Anytime you can have your student athletes put pen to paper and formalize little tiny micro habits, they have a better chance of improving. It's an easy activity. You just put in the inner circle, the things you can control, in your outer circle, the things you can't. And you heard Suzy talk about those. And I know you as coaches have talked about this, but it's important to spend time, write it down and formalize it. Strategy number 2 is to reset those expectations around, first of all, being able to build the awareness. And so this activity has your players sit down. They talk about each part of their game with each other. They write down what they're trying to work on, and they ask their teammate to get their back. So this actually encourages them to own where they are and trust each other to get better. And, a great thing to do right before practice is called the eye test. You bring your players together only, no coaches, no support staff, and they have the eye test with each other. Check in. Does anybody need anything before we go to practice or the game? Give me 100% of 100%. And if you don't have that, what can we do for you? It's just a stopping moment for anybody that needs to exhale and share. And then you just simply say, we've got your back for that one or two that may be struggling on that day. Strategy number 3, when we can build the awareness that there are a lot of people out there that suck the life out of us. We always say that there's a third of the people that will suck the life out of you. There's a middle third that blow in the wind. When all is good, they're in. And when it gets bad, they're just the biggest whiners and complainers. And then you have top third, the people that go out there and grind it every day. Well, here's another formal opportunity for each player to sit down and go, wow, how much am I really complaining a lot? Maybe I am a bottom third person. And what am I a bottom third about? So this is a great strategy to build awareness and to protect your own excellence. So you may be bumping into a teammate like, ooh, she is so bottom third. I'm not going to let her junk become part of my junk. So it's a great tool to work together, to communicate, but to build that awareness and making sure that everything I'm doing is going to be improving how I think, speak, and act. And at the end of the day, when we can get the student outwardly focused on their own development, we know they can control that. And it will help them lay a foundation to their resiliency. And like Suzy said, these links are in the chat box. Process versus outcome goals. You know where it starts? It starts with accountability. What holds up your process traveling along the process road is accountability. How far forward are you moving? Have you taken a step back, and can you own it? So this idea of practicing owning our accountability of what we are and what we're not. And I want to take a time out and thank Jeff Jansen and his leadership group for letting us use his activities because they're super. So this is a great drill. You've got to own your blame game, and you've got to have a solution in your claim game in how you're going to go ahead and tackle the things that you deflect. Because at the end of the day, this is an area we can all get better at, even as coaches. Maybe a stopping moment for you. Are you someone that has a tendency to complain or blame or not say it's your job or deny or cover up or have confusion? So an opportunity for your players to sit down, put pen to paper, and get it done. The last strategy is the performance skills, stain my brain. It's a trust activity. Players always need to be able to build trust with one another. We don't spend enough time stopping and recognizing what people are great at. And so this drill, this activity, you sit everybody down in a circle. They put their name at the top of the paper. Then they just move the paper to the right. Now I've received the person's paper and it's got their name. Let's say Suzy and I are teammates. And now I'm going to write down a performance skill that I experienced from Suzy that impacted me. After 25, 30 minutes, your team is done. You return the papers to the original owner, and they now have a page of all these reasons why their teammates trust them. And it could be anything to do with performance skills. We'll also put the One Softball high performance glossary that will give you great opportunities for them to see the areas that are impactful overall. And when we do this, we also want you to know we have another activity that is just like this, but it's around relationship skills. So performance skills have to do with getting to the top. Relationship skills have to do with staying on top because it has to do with maintaining great relationships. So every day we're going to ask you, can you ask your players, was this the best 2 hours of your day? Because we want it to be a release for them at the end of the day. And so in review, I just want you to know that we're hoping that you'll sign up and be a part of our survey in 2021. And on that note, I just want each and every one of you to have a wonderful holiday and to actually go out there and spend some time, invest in yourself, just like you are here today. And I want to thank Dr. Suzy McNulty again for everything that she's doing for her industry and how we in softball are benefiting. So Suzy, I just want to say thank you to you once again.
Thanks, Coach Sue, and I echo your sentiments that I say thank you to NFCA. Thank you to all the coaches out there, all the hard work you're doing. I see you working hard every day on the fields, off the fields, and I really enjoy watching as these kids grow.
And, I don't know if, the survey is relatively quick, right? So they can sign up now, and it's about a 10-minute survey in 2021. And I don't know if you know, but if you do fill out the survey, you're guaranteed to get the bunt down and run the first and third perfectly. So sign up for the survey, get great defense in return. Thanks, everybody. Happy holidays.